It's good to be back.
Congrats on the new announcement. You launched a new color today.
Yes, we launched a bunch of new colors, actually. I don't know if you saw my live hacking, but I launched cyan, I launched red,
Oh, that's
magenta,
true.
neon.
Yeah.
So, Sahil, you and I go a long way back. So, please introduce yourself and...
Yeah. How do we meet? So I built this app called Turntable FM. Does anyone know Turntable FM? So I built this app. This is what it looked like. This was all my work. So I built Turntable for iPhone. But the problem was there was only mock JSON.
What is it? Is it like collaborative Spotify?
It's like collaborative Spotify, probably illegal. But look at that. Like, it looked amazing, skeuomorphic, all this beautiful stuff. And because of a technology that Guillermo built called Socket.io, it allowed this kind of real-time interaction, and you could it was magical. I mean, it truly was magical at the time. And so I was freelancing for them. I had built the iOS client, and I got stuck.
How old were you at this time? Because I think it's an important detail.
I think I was 19 at the time.
And this was your second big gig, I guess.
Yeah, so I built Pinterest for iPhone.
No big deal.
No big deal. And design built Pinterest for iPhone, and then Turntable was I was super excited about it. But I hate servers. I hate real time. I want to build products. I like iPhone apps because I can just show someone, like, look at this thing I built. It's real time. It's local first. All that good stuff. Anyway, so I got stuck. I couldn't figure out how to actually communicate them. So I found who's the guy behind this thing, Guillermo. Okay, I'm going to email him, and I just sent an email saying, hey, I can't figure this out. Here's my code. So kind of like what you do to like ChatGPT, right? Here's my code. Like, please fix.
Before ChatGPT, we had Rauch, and you could just email him.
We had public email addresses, and so you replied, one shot prompt, nailed it.
It works. Thank you.
It was good enough for me. It worked. I shipped the app to them. It was literally like I had built the entire thing except this last thing, and so you solved my problem.
And later on, I remember I was reading Hacker News one day, and you showed up, and you had this idea for Gumroad. And you kind of always been building in public. So tell us a little bit more about Gumroad and the story there.
Yeah, so after Pinterest and Turntable, my third thing was this thing called Gumroad. Gumroad I had built. I wanted to sell something on the internet. I had a Twitter audience, a few thousand people. I had an icon pack that I had designed and wanted to sell. And as I mentioned before, like, I like making things. I like shipping. I don't like servers. And I don't like payments. I don't like anything that sounds too nerdy, I'm cool. I'm a designer, I'm a designer. Anyway, I basically got stuck again, and I was like, wait a second, I have this audience, I have this thing I want to give to them. There's Dropbox, there's Bitly, there's all these ways of sharing content. There was no way to actually just add a credit card form to it, and so that's kind of what Gumroad became.
Like, Dropbox would have share URLs. How cool would it be if you could slap a paywall before you get to the downloadable URL?
Yeah, literally just like hide the URL, enter your credit card information, hit Stripe, purchase goes through, window.location.
And so how big has Gumroad gotten?
It's pretty big now. We've processed $1 billion for creators. So creators have earned $1 billion on the platform. It's pretty cool. COVID helped a lot with that.
One of the upsides.
So yeah, it's been 14 years. So that email, I think that was 2011. So 14 years ago.
That's amazing. It's amazing what the web can do, really. And to go from an idea to getting it out there, trying it out, it does remind me a little bit of the make it work, make it right, iterate. So hopefully that came across. So yeah, congrats on Gumroad. But let's get a little bit into sort of the tech stack. What was your first, your MVP? How do you get it out there?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, but actually the first version of Gumroad was serverless. Google had released this thing called Web App Framework for Python. They had this thing called
Google App Engine.
Google App Engine. And effectively,
the OG serverless.
Imagine a company that did hosting and provided the front-end framework. Full stack.
Who could
pretty
think
cool.
of that?
Pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Google drops the ball a lot, I find. So they built this thing, and all of a sudden I could have my database schema right in the same file as all my controller methods, and in one file I could have the back end, and another file I could have front end, and so it enabled me to build Gumroad. And then when I hired my first engineer, he's like, "Hey, we got to use Rails. Like
Nice.
Everyone's using Rails. We got to rewrite. An engineer ever told you rewrite everything? Every once in a while, they're correct.
I love it when your first hire is just like, well, let's rewrite the whole thing.
But I was not that good of an engineer. I'm like, okay, you're going to be the one writing all the code. You get to pick. That is clearly where the energy was at that time. Everyone was obsessed with Ruby, Rails. It was amazing. jQuery, MooTools, like all this stuff. And so we kind of rewrote it. It took a week or two to rewrite the whole thing in Ruby, and then we moved to AWS. And actually, Mitchell Hashimoto from HashiCorp, he was.
This is an amazing story.
He was So I was like, I don't like servers. Someone else has to figure this thing out for me. And so a friend of mine, Mitchell, was down to freelance, and so he had been working on this thing called Vagrant at the time.
He started this small company, HashiCorp. You might have heard of it.
Yeah, if you use Nomad or Terraform, he's a pretty smart guy. And so he did some hourly freelancing for us. He set up our Chef Vagrant setup, and basically, hopefully, as long as nothing went wrong, like I ran the command and the thing would deploy. And so we kind of moved to AWS, and basically, I mean, even since then, like basically, going on like now 13 years.
Yeah, so you've iterated on the stack a bunch over the years. You have this awesome tweet about here's the timeline. You can see it here. Here's the timeline of the tech stack of Gumroad.
Yeah, I mean, think of 12 years, right? Ruby, Rails. Pretty quickly you want to do stuff. You want Ajax. You want some kind of magic loaders and all this stuff. So we added jQuery. Every page was like had a checkout.js, product.js, and then we learned about Flight, and so we migrated the front end to Flight, which is this terrible framework that Twitter had made that no one uses. I think Gumroad may be the large. Actually, we just deleted it a few months ago, so thank God. But before that, we might have been the largest production instance of Flight.js. And I kind of saw like that in the React stuff happening, and honestly, it just was like scared the shit out of me.
What was your first contact with React, Next.js? Like because you've been sort of coding in so many different languages, runtimes. When did you first hear about React, Next, and what were your first impressions?
I think a couple of people had left Gumroad to start a company, and they were using React, and they were writing like HTML in JavaScript, which was like the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. And so at that point, I was like, "Oh right, I guess I'm not participating in this React thing."
Right.
And in 2015 we failed to raise our Series B. I let go most of the team, so I literally we kind of from 2015 to 2024. As that slide said, we were basically kind of stuck, and we basically slowly migrated more and more of the stuff to React. But everyone else was doing that. And then the thing that got me excited about Next was we'd started building these other side projects.
Because you have a holding company now. You have the alphabet.
We're trying to have the alphabet. Yeah, I mean, part of my belief is that shipping has become so fast that it's super reasonable for a company as small as ours to have 26 different
How big
projects.
is your company?
We're 32 freelancers. 2 of us are full-time. So two people, we do about $22 million in revenue.
So you're building a lot of products. You're iterating a lot. You're just
you can almost say the product is the process is the product. I want to get to a place where nothing. It should be so quickly, just like Gumroad in the early days.
Yeah, that's
have an idea and
amazing.
Put it in some customer's hands, and they'll tell you why your idea sucks. And then you make a V1 and a V2. And
I could see why you don't like servers, because your very first spark with Gumroad was, I just have a product idea, I need to get it out there. And today your desire is to do more of that, right?
Yeah, servers are taking the bus to the coffee shop. It's just, no, a skateboard is plenty. That's all I need.
So you've been sort of outspoken about this, right? In fact, you've been outspoken about tech debt, things that you now want to delete from the world, and at least from your Gumroad stack. This one in particular is pretty.
You guys seen this one?
I saw it it was all over my feed. It's it broke the internet.
I deleted this tweet. So no, just kidding. It's still there. I'll die. This is the hill I die on, I guess. But so I tweeted this, and at the end of the day, technical debt is not a bad. It's not an evil thing. It's a thing that happens when you have customers. You're more focused on providing features for that customer base. Right? Anything older than a day old has technical debt. Anything with customers has technical debt. But basically, make it work, right? If I started seeing these amazing products, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, these amazing experiences, and I would just look at our stack, and I started writing code again because Claude came out, and all of a sudden I felt productive. I was like, oh,
that's interesting, because I think you had sort of taken a step back from coding, and
I
Did you
did.
go through was it like a dark time of not using your creative powers, or how do you look back on like the non-coding times?
I felt like I was creative on a higher level of abstraction, and I was basically hiring people, telling them what to do, and fulfilling my creative outlet, like writing and drawing and painting and doing all these sorts of things. But truly, in hindsight, the honest answer is that like I was like basically scared that I would not be able to
Interesting.
wrap my head around React and admit that I was like not really an engineer. Like I was LARPing.
Fascinating.
And
certain areas of React have been intimidating to people.
it's still like kind of parts of it. I'm very grateful for Next because I feel like Next is my buddy in the, again.
For me, Flux was quite the paradigm shift of like, whoa, like, do I have to learn all this? Like when state management became a big thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, for me, starting Next was, what if we didn't have state management on the client side? What if it was just all like data fetching? And that's why React Server Components made so much sense to me, because it's just like...
React Server Components are amazing. But for a huge period of time, it was just the scariest thing ever. And so I basically stopped writing code. And then AI and Claude came out in June. And I started writing code again. And very quickly I realized, make it work. Like the only way I can make these ideas in my head work is to leave behind Ruby, which is not typed. It means AI has no idea what's going on. Everything is like Rails is magic, but it also means that like everything is available to you, which means AI has a really hard time writing it. I think Rails was built for a world in which the bottleneck was humans typing.
Yes.
Like if you like type, like it's fun. I love Ruby. I love Rails. Yeah. It's so fun. Like if I want to build an app by writing on a piece of paper, I'll use Ruby.
Because you're economizing for keystrokes, but we're entering an era of, well, I'm not doing the keystrokes. Like I'm not writing the actual like syntax. So you're just generating all that with AI.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're trying to solve problems for customers. Like customers don't listen to classical music. They listen to EDM.
Yeah.
You can
listen. Or they listen to VI DJ music.
Oh, that was cool.
That was pretty cool.
And so, I'm like, we're a company. We want to ship products. The way we ship these complex, beautiful, real-time streaming, local first, all this, probably not going to happen Ruby on Rails. And the definition, in my opinion, of technical debt is eventually you're going to regret sticking with something. You're not willing to admit that like some sort of a sunk cost fallacy. Yeah. And
if you look at Gumroad, the product, like what are things that to you, like what are ideas or product changes or experiences that you feel like the technology, the old stack was like holding you back from executing? And in fact, I want to call out something that's really cool, that you evaluated HTMX and then you wrote a very thoughtful piece on why HTMX didn't meet your needs. And it got published on the HTMX blog, which is
awesome.
Awesome. It's awesome. I really respect. So what was your experience there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool idea, but I think it basically says you're 99% of your app is Rails, right, in HTML. And you don't really, like, you just need a little bit of stuff, and you don't want to learn JavaScript in order to, like, get this stuff. And that's kind of, I think, the value of HTMX. But the truth is, like, I don't have those. That's not what I want to build. I don't want to build, like, a static website with, like, one button that increments a counter, which is, like, what all these demos are. They're like, check out how little code it takes to, like, have this button increment a counter. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But, like, how does it look when, Gumroad is written in this language, right? And so we tried HTMX, but again, it all stems from like you're taking a bus to grab coffee, like you're spinning up a server, and then you're like I got a new laptop and I downloaded Ruby so I could ship, and it downloaded Python. Like the first thing it's like, I'm like, what Ruby needs Python? What is going on? What? Yeah. And every phone, everything has JavaScript on it, and like it does, like JavaScript has won just by nature of being the one language that exists on every computer on earth.
In so many ways, it brings me back to my beginning, because when I wrote Socket.io, what I realized at the time was if JavaScript is running in every web browser, and the future of applications is going to be more dynamic, more interactive, more real time, then that's going to act as a forcing function of your backend stack choices. Yes. You're going to need this unification of, I didn't understand that there would be a component model that's universal like React, but that was kind of my intuition. And in fact, the reason that I pivoted so hard from building my own things like Socket.io to React to Next.js was like, that was kind of like where the future was headed, and I wanted to embrace it as fast as possible. And it sounds like...
Where's the future headed now? I mean, like, what's next?
That's what I was going to say. Like, it sounds like you're a very early adopter of AI, and like... to me, it feels like AI will define the next level of developer experience. So today we talked about TurboPack. I'm extremely excited about it. TurboPack plus incremental caching almost completes the journey of what I would call developer experience 1.0. Because once you get to the point where
1.0, we're at 1.0.
Well, I love using the metaphor of software 1.0 and software 2.0 from Karpathy. Software 1.0 is what you were talking about earlier. Like, we were writing by hand all the algorithms, all the data structures, all the instructions. We're provisioning servers. And we're going to a world that is AI native, where it's more around training and it's more around feedback, where it's more around automation and it's about human language and more inclusion of more folks into the software development process and so on and so forth. So I call that world DX 2.0 because DX 1.0 will give us diminishing returns. I don't know if I will rewrite TurboPack from Rust into, whatever comes next that is more bare metal than Rust to shave off another millisecond. Because we're, again, going to get to the point of diminishing returns on, like, if I save a file to see the result on the screen, how much faster can I possibly get? And also, I think the question, and I would love to hear your input, at that point, like, are you optimizing for something that people will do less and less and less over time? Like, will we all be opening a text editor, firing up a dev server, typing in keystrokes, and then seeing them on the right hand of the screen? Or are we going to go into more of an agentic and more intention-driven way of developing software?
Yeah, I mean, my hot take is that the next is V0, which is, if you think about it, why can't I just build the software? Like, why do I have to open up? Right now I go to V0 and then I go to Cursor.
Yeah.
And then I build my thing and I ship it to Vercel and it's pretty awesome. But, like, why can't I go into V0 and then hit deploy and then connect to my... I really think, I mean, that... and you can debug it. You have access to all that code. But V0 is like the coolest thing I think that has happened in the last year. For me,
I had this surreal experience when I was on a plane from Kyoto to Okinawa. And I wanted to show a partner of ours how big their JSON payload was. I needed to visualize it first. That's the things that one does in a plane from Kyoto to Okinawa. You visualize JSON payloads. And I had this fork in the road ahead of me. It's like, am I going to search for another half-baked ad-ridden tool that's not going to be quite the screenshot that I want to take to represent this data and whatever? What was the cognitive effort to generate that software?
Yeah.
So when you go into a world where generating software on demand that's personal to you is in competition with 10 blue links to software that exists that you have to sift through and find the one that quite meets your demands, I think it's kind of like a science fiction thing. It's kind of wild.
Dave Morin had this bit a while back. This is another throwback to the back in the day, but there was an app called Path that this guy Dave Morin had built. Anyway, he was interviewed and he said, I built a custom, one-of-a-kind, bespoke app. I had an app built for my assistant and us to communicate. And everyone kind of made fun of him for, it's a little bit, whatever, hoity-toity. But that's the dream. I mean, that's, we made fun because we're all jealous. We're like, we all would love. I would love an app that just helps me and this one other person.
There was someone that created an app just to talk to themselves. Like, you could download John on the App Store.
Every developer wants their own to-do list app, right? Who has built a to-do list app? Everyone wants an events app so they can hang out with their friends and colleagues.
The other thing that I'm hearing, so this obviously is like my own personal needs. Like, I create my own personal software, or I create software that I just share with my friends. I've seen a lot of people tell me that they're developing software to connect with their children, to connect with their significant others. But there's also like the enterprise version of this, which is there's companies that are shutting down massive contracts with software providers that we're building sort of like a whole like kitchen sink of features. And the price gets really high because of that complexity. But kind of like what we talked about today about essential complexity and accidental complexity, maybe the software, the SaaS tool that you're buying is matching a level of complexity that you simply don't have. So you're just better off building your own app for your own company. And I think this extends, by the way, to not just software, but I think AI is also transforming how much more we can do as individuals, right?
What do you think happens to jobs? Like, how do jobs changed when like literally as a designer, I go to V0 before I go to Figma. Like that's a complete shift.
I think my optimistic take is that it's about doing more with less. So the personal example that I have is that I had never got to learn much about WebGL, 3JS, React 3 Fiber, and now I go to V0 and any funky idea that I have for interactive data visualization, I can just generate on demand. And I think for me, it like really goes after like it exposes that creative and design side of me a lot more, but it also brings out the engineering ambition that, to your point earlier, like sometimes you are a victim to your own like negative thoughts of like, am I going to be able to write that? Am I going to be able to do that? Am I going to be able to learn that new language? And V0 just gives you the ability to just do it all yourself. And I think this is frankly going to impact how companies look at like roles.
Yeah.
And I think you've shared some thoughts about like what are the like roles in a company in the future where AI is allowing us to do more.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get to sit in a lucky place where we try to be at the bleeding edge. Every once in a while, that means we bleed, but it also means we kind of see a little bit of the future. And this is how we see things going. And it's not less roles. I think a lot of people think, oh, there's going to be less roles. I actually think there's going to be more roles because a designer who was stuck just designing checkboxes can actually do what they went to art school. They got this amazing education in fashion. And then they like design checkboxes on the internet.
For sure.
Right? And this engineer who gets
it could just be Shadzien. We all know that.
Yeah, there should be one, and that's Shad.
And then you use AI to create a new version of it.
Yeah, I don't want to hire someone to design checkboxes. I'm happy you guys are doing that. But all of a sudden, our designers are free and they're amazing. We hired them.
Yeah.
Right. And so now they can like reinvent the brand. Right. They can design experiences like this. They can design the entire instead of just designing a static prototype in Figma, which was an achievement 3 or 4 years ago. Wow, you can get all that. They can actually design the entire app.
You've also shared, maybe controversially, that you believe that some 10x engineers will become 0.1x engineers, and some 1x engineers will become 100x engineers. Like, how do you explain that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the identities will shift. I think certain people who can't move on and can't embrace, if they're stuck with the ergonomics of, let's say, CSS, I think is a really good example. I personally think CSS is dead. Like, Tailwind should just be incorporated into the browser. It should be a global standard, and you should just do...
That's hot.
Like, just, it's there. It's perfect. Thank you, Adam and the team. It's so good. But so many people, I'm sure so many people in the audience went through this experience of looking, just like I went through with React and HTML. It looks ugly. Yeah. There's just like this inherent distaste. And
I did go through the yuck phase. There's a great video that I posted one time of a baby like trying out a lemon, and then the baby gets like it's the worst thing I've ever tasted. And that was my reaction to Tailwind.
Yeah.
Like it looked weird. And I think you have a really good point about we have to overcome into the future that kind of like gut reaction to like what things look like in code.
Yeah.
Like whether something looks short or long, or I think with AI, it just stops making sense, like what things look like or whether they're optimized for typing or not.
Yeah, it's assembly. We don't look at assembly binary, but it's there. What matters is the speed, the performance, the user experience, and so if you're stuck in CSS land, then all of a sudden you're a 0.1x engineer, designer, Tailwind, whatever person. But if you're willing to move on, all of a sudden someone who maybe wasn't able to wrap their head around nesting and cascading and all these things is now a really good
What's your take in terms of like, our AIs, when you interact with V0, like, is it thinking, is it reasoning, or is it just like automating? What's the balance for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically Googling and Stack Overflowing on my behalf, right? Like, I think what it's doing is going to all of these things, avoiding all the ads, clicking all the X's, getting the thing, getting 10 of them, and then converging.
Command F.
Converging on sort of this like in-between state of what you're looking for. And so as long, I'm not too worried about like AI taking my job, because like I don't think AI can really think for you, but it can type really, really well. And so I can have an idea. Yeah. It can go turn that idea into 500 lines of code. I can play with the idea. I can click the buttons. I can show the modal. I can do all of that stuff. And when I'm really happy with it, it's done.
Yeah, if the computer was the bicycle for the mind, this is like the nuclear powered like SpaceX like rocket ship for the mind. Because
yeah, I mean, I think everyone becomes a product manager. Everyone loves product management. I think that's why we all get started. We want to make stuff. We want to put it in the hands of users. And then it's just, there's so many components that you have to break up that role into, okay, actually we need a designer to do just the design part, then a front-end engineer, and then a back-end engineer.
Is there a parallel with this and provisioning servers for you? Because you've been quite spoken about like not liking your EC2 setup, and like, is there a world where like what is the parallel between the world that you're going into and like what is the relationship that you've drawn to leaving servers behind?
Yeah, I mean, I think servers are fun to think about, but I don't want to work with them. I want people. I think everyone should work on what they enjoy, and I think there are certain people who love that, and they should do that, and they should provide that as a service to everybody
like Lee
else.
and his photo are VPS.
Yeah,
for example.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you built Socket.io and loved doing it, and I built Turntable FM's iPhone app and loved doing it, and and the world benefited from that relationship. I think it's pretty similar. I think where it's kind of funny that you're kind of in the same place in a way where you're building a platform that allows us to build Gumroad, which allows our creators to not have to do the things that they don't want to do. I mean, everyone uses other people's businesses for that purpose, right? And so I think it's super exciting. And I'm not anti-server, just like I'm not anti-Ruby on Rails. Like, it's a great thing to know about and a concept to learn. And if you really want to host your own server, like, we're actually going to get an office in New York, and I would love to just go. Like, if it makes sense to have some service, just like plug it into the wall. Like, I think one of our DevOps engineers did the math, and he says he thinks Gumroad could run on 5 MacBook Pros. And that's the other thing that I think people don't really talk about. Like, Ruby on, all this stuff, it's been 15 years. Like, computers have gotten really fast. And so all of the assumptions that led to servers, which is effectively nobody has a car. And so actually we need a bus. Right. And we're going to build a bus. We're going to provide this bus service to the world. But all of a sudden, everyone has a nuclear e-bike. Like, maybe we don't need the bus system anymore. Right. And every once in a while you may, and then you can rent it out. Or, if you really love buses, you can just like buy an old bus and like put
You
it
also run an interesting A/B test, because you told me that because now you've pivoted into this holding company that creates products. You've now had the experience of like testing out different ways of creating products and getting them out into the world. And so you were able to do this side-by-side comparison between like, this runs on servers, this doesn't, this runs on Next, this doesn't. What was that experience like? Yeah, I mean, it really made me realize that like it just comes down to the client side experience. It's the experience the user wants to have, and it's like, I want to push everything I possibly can right next to the user, and that means like push all the server side stuff, all the server stuff, edge. I guess like the ultimate edge is just like having all of the compute run on the phone. Last week I built this thing called Door. This AI, one of our letters is going to be D. Turns out that's the letter in the English language. It's an AI powered doorbell. It basically does facial recognition, and it plays your welcome song when you walk in the office. Right. So just gets you amped for the day. And it's a Next.js app. And I was like, oh, how do I build this? It's like Open API. It turns out OpenAI doesn't let you do facial recognition for AI ethics. So I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? There's no way I can figure this out. Like, serverless, right? Facial recognition. Turns out, like, facial recognition is a 6 megabyte file that you put into your public folder. You reference from your page.tsx, and all of a sudden you have on-device, in-browser facial recognition, runs every 30 milliseconds, and then you detect a face. You ping, it's serverless. I don't need a speaker. I just ping Spotify API, and then it plays on the device. Amazing. I built it 3 days and I V0'd it, and then I cursored it. And it's live in the office. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about continuing to learn from you about what you're doing with Next and how V0 can help you. So actually, I have one ask. Okay, I have two questions you can pick. One is there anything you would want to steal from another front end framework, like TanStack? I know Tanner's here. I've heard good things about it. Yeah, is there anything that you would take? The other ask is, one thing I love about Rails and the server is you can just SSH in and just change something, like Rails C, and then you could, like, right now you have to kind of spin up a page with a console on it, or something. Like, will Vercel launch a console? So on the first one, I'll say I love that the web is such a powerful medium where compute can just run anywhere. To your point, you can run a lot of compute on the device. You can run very rich applications. I mean, SPAs, whatever you want to call them. And so there are a number of frameworks like TanStack that have done a great job at like exposing that power. And while I believe that server-driven UI is the right default, Next could totally just give you more power to do client routing, for example, or to create areas where it's totally offline ready or local first. The other one that's huge for me is, and this kind of goes into like what is the future in my mind for Next, Vercel, and the web, is I do really want to compete with the walled gardens of iOS native applications. The nightmare scenario for all of us, and I think sometimes we get caught up in the competition between frameworks, but in reality, we're all on team web. We're all building on this open platform. We all benefit from the tide that lifts all boats. And what I want to do is have the best experiences possible for products. I would never want to hear that, oh, we couldn't build this experience because we're limited by the platform, we were limited by the frameworks. And so often we get caught up on the APIs or the flavors or the capabilities or whatever it is. But my thing is like, let's look at the product experience, right? And legitimately, like we can do so much better as a web, like in terms of like gestures, animations. I think there's also a cultural component. I called it out the other day where what does it mean to put out something into the world and refine it and put polish and craftsmanship? So I tend to think less ultimately about frameworks and more about what they enable. My dream is that we all start backwards from, okay, I saw this really cool product. Let's break it down. How was it built? And we can continue to make that sort of the fitness function of our efforts. And hopefully AI will help get us there, because we're just going to be generating a lot of experiences, a lot of content, a lot of really cool things, and maybe put a little bit less attention on the aesthetics of the code or your preferences for the stack, and more on like, is this experience really the best that I could build? So,
be awesome.
Thank you. All right, and everyone, thank you all for joining us at Next.js Conf. Let's give it up for Sahil, who was an amazing...
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much, man.
And stay tuned when we launch the new Gumroad. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're going to open source Gumroad. We're going to open source Gumroad on Rails. And then we're going to open source Gumroad next.
Oh, wow.
And then AI is going to have all the data it needs to help everyone else make the same transition. So
all right,
it's going to be awesome.
Thank you all.
So, yeah.